Education is quickly changing in the United States. It's hard for parents to keep up with what their children are learning in school, and it's even harder to understand the national trends in education and where they're taking our children and our country. I hope that today is the day that we will resolve to take ownership over the education of our children. So let's start by trying to understand what's happening in our public schools. Hello, my name is Jane Robbins, and I'm with the American Principals Project. I have a disturbing story to tell, a story about the Common Core state standards. We need to realize that the Common Core will strip our states of their constitutional authority over education. Parents will no longer be able to control or even influence what their children are taught. The Common Core scheme will ultimately empower the federal government to control school curricula in violation of 3 federal statutes.
Jane, I don't know too much about the Common Core. Could you just start by defining what we are talking about exactly?
The Common Core State Standards Initiative is currently a set of national common K-12 content standards in English language arts and math, ideally to be adopted in all 50 states so that education will be standardized throughout the country. The supposed purpose of the Common Core is to impose rigorous standards so that our students will be better prepared for competing in the global economy and to allow comparison of student performance among states. Common Core standards have currently been adopted by 45 states and the District of Columbia. This most recent effort of progressive education reformers is primarily connected with a nonprofit group in Washington, D.C. called Achieve, Inc., which wrote the national standards, with lavish funding from private foundations, especially the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The real power here is the Gates Foundation, which has spent over $100 million helping create and propagate the standards, and has plans to spend many millions more. There is a great deal of money to be made at the educational trough.
I'm trying to understand how these private groups could have so much influence over 50 states. Is the federal government involved in this?
Secretary of Education Arne Duncan is a huge proponent of Common Core, and under his direction, the Federal Department of Education has used its power of the purse to essentially bribe states to adopt the standards. So desperate state officials had to decide without consulting their legislatures whether to commit to the Common Core and all it entails in order to get race to the top money. The Common Core standards were finally released in June 2010, and states were given 2 summer vacation months to get their state school boards to sign off on the Common Core commitment, again with no involvement by the legislature. The other way the federal government is promoting Common Core is through No Child Left Behind waivers. The U.S. Department of Education is encouraging states to adopt Common Core in order to qualify for a waiver from the most demanding provisions of No Child Left Behind. The U.S. Department of Education gave the 2 consortia $360 million for test creation. Now, once that money runs out, the states that are members of the consortia will have to assume the costs. These types of computer-driven tests are far more expensive than traditional testing, and there has not been a candid discussion on the ongoing costs this creates for taxpayers. Something to consider about the people developing these PARCC and Smarter Balance tests. The PARCC tests are being designed by the same group of progressive reformers that gave us the Common Core standards. Common Core proponents claim that these are just standards, not curriculum, and states will be in charge of their own curricula. But this claim is misleading at best. The point of standards is to drive curriculum. Standards say what should be taught in the classroom. The curriculum just adds the details. And we know that what's on the national tests will very concretely dictate curriculum. The 2 testing consortia admitted in their applications for federal grants that they would use the money to develop curriculum models, and the U.S. Department of Education bragged about this when it made the grants. So the inevitable result of the Common Core scheme will be a national curriculum.
Is this legal?
No, the U.S. Constitution leaves education policy to the states. Despite this, both parties have been trying to centralize educational control in Washington for years. Even so, Congress has passed 3 separate statutes prohibiting the U.S. Department of Education from supervising, directing, or controlling curriculum. By coercing states into Common Core and funding national tests that will dictate curriculum, the Obama administration is violating 3 statutes. By committing to Common Core, a state agrees to implement the standards word for word. It may not change anything, it may not delete anything. It may add a small amount of content, but no more than 15% of any content area. 15% doesn't sound like state taxpayers and parents have control to me, yet they still have to pay the bills while their voices are shut out of the process.
If states are locked into these content standards, what happens if parents or teachers determine that some aspect of Common Core isn't working in the classroom?
There will be no one to call. No one in the state, not the local school principal, not the superintendent, not the local school board, not the state school superintendent, not the legislators, not the governor. No one will have any power to change any standard, which leads to a disturbing question. Who will have control over the standards in the future, to revise them if they aren't working in the classroom? Common Core is owned and copyrighted by the National Governors Association and the Council of Chief State School Officers. So what does this mean for parents? It means parents will have no way of knowing the identities and positions of the people in charge of the standards. We will truly have anonymous people controlling our children's education. This is education without representation.
Okay, I get the fact that this makes an end run around state control of education in total violation of that principle of federalism our founders gave us. But what about the standards themselves?
Common Core proponents claim the standards are rigorous and will make our students college ready. Well, not exactly. One of the drafters of the math standards admitted that the college they will prepare our children for is a non-selective community college, not a four-year university. At one point, the creators of Common Core claimed the standards were internationally benchmarked and that they were as rigorous as those in countries whose students score the highest on international tests. But the Common Core Validation Committee was never shown any evidence of this. And the Common Core website no longer even claims that the standards are internationally benchmarked. Instead, it now says they are informed by the standards of other countries, whatever that means. Let's look at the quality of the standards specifically. First, the math standards. Dr. James Milgram of Stanford University, the only mathematician on the validation committee, said that it's almost a joke that a student would be prepared for university-level math after having completed the Common Core curriculum. One problem is that Common Core moves Algebra 1 from 8th grade to 9th grade, which means it will be more difficult for most students to reach calculus in high school, as expected by selective universities. Another problem, it will teach geometry by an experimental method never used successfully anywhere in the world. And remember, a teacher who sees that this experiment isn't working will have no one to go to in order to get it changed. Other problems with Common Core's math standards led Dr. Milgram to conclude that by 8th grade, our students will be about 2 years behind those of the highest achieving countries. Moving on to the English language arts standards. This is where we see the really troubling philosophy behind Common Core. Dr. Sandra Stotsky, who served on the validation committee but refused to sign off on the English language arts standards because they were so inadequate, described them as empty skill sets that won't prepare students for authentic college coursework. From what she has seen of the standards and the drafter's commentary, she's afraid the reading level that will deem students college ready will be about 7th grade level. Even more troubling is Common Core's de-emphasis on studying classic literature in favor of reading nonfiction informational texts, such as technical manuals and brochures. One education publisher even includes teaching restaurant menus rather than literature. It's not clear exactly how much literature study is to be replaced by informational text, but the creators of the English standards suggest at least 50% of the reading in English classes should be nonfiction rather than literature. Now, there are several problems with this. First, most English teachers in the country have not been trained to teach this kind of material, nor would the good ones want to. So those who don't quit in frustration will have to be retrained. Second, what little teacher training there has been has instructed teachers to treat our most important historical documents, such as the Gettysburg Address, as if they were just sentences on a page, without context and without cultural importance. However, the most serious problem is the philosophy behind this approach, the philosophy that children shouldn't be overeducated, shouldn't spend time studying something that won't give them practical assistance in their future jobs, that the point of education is to train children to be cogs in a government-managed economic machine, not to educate them to be informed, thinking citizens in a democratic republic, to be better human beings. That is what studying great literature can do for students, but that's what Common Core seeks to minimize. The education establishment, as well as the many vendors set to make money on Common Core through our tax dollars, have been lobbying teachers and local school systems for months with assurances that Common Core is the magic bullet to solve our education problems. But because the standards have been implemented so far primarily in the lower grades, where they are less objectionable, the teachers who will be the most adversely affected don't really know what they're in for. The big teachers' unions, such as the National Education Association and the American Federation of Teachers, that are supporting Common Core are doing their members no favors. Another provision of the Race to the Top grant process, President Obama's education scheme, required states that wanted federal money to build huge student databases. The feds recommended that these databases ultimately contain over 400 data points on each student: test scores, disciplinary record, health history, family income range, religious affiliation, just to name a few. The U.S. Department of Education is now pressuring states to turn over that data in exchange for various federal grants. And the two Common Core testing consortia are contractually obligated to give the Department of Education student-level data resulting from the tests. And the Department of Education recently gutted federal education privacy law to allow sharing of this personally identifiable data with other government agencies and with private entities, so long as the sharing can be described as an audit or evaluation of an education program. The people pushing these Big Brother data systems realize these efforts require clever marketing to convince policymakers and the American public to make the cultural leap towards centralized collection of student data. They claim that they must collect all student data from preschool through the workforce to see how their education policies are working, and student and family privacy must be sacrificed in the process. The Department of Education is prohibited by statute from maintaining a national student database, so it's getting around that by making the states collect the data and then share it with the federal government. The Department of Education is open about wanting to share education data with the Department of Labor so that the government can track children from preschool through career. It's a progressive school-to-work dream to know everything there is to know about a citizen so he can be better plugged into the managed economic machine.
What's the price tag?
No one knows how much it will cost to implement Common Core. Most states signed on without performing a thorough cost analysis because the Obama administration didn't give them time. One aspect of increased costs will be professional development, teacher training, which even Common Core proponents admit will have to be intensive. Another is textbooks and instructional materials to align with Common Core, and companies such as Bill Gates' Microsoft and other giant education publishers are salivating at the millions to be made. A third is the cost of the new tests, which will be huge. States will have to invest millions in new technology, purchasing, maintaining, upgrading for the computerized test. In addition, many of the items on the test will have to be scored by hand rather than by computer. Presumably, those individuals hand scoring the test will want to be paid. One expert on assessment costs estimates that annual per pupil costs of the new Common Core tests may be about $100 per student per year. This is an extraordinary amount compared to the testing costs reported by most states in 2007. In fact, over 10 times as much as reported by many states. A national study estimated that nationwide Common Core implementation costs could be about $16 billion. And that study excluded some costs that are hard to quantify. In any event, Common Core promises to be a huge unfunded mandate. The thought that we can successfully nationalize and standardize education with a Bill Gates-type Common Core operating system in a country of 300 million wildly diverse people is, frankly, ludicrous. The answer is quite the opposite, to decentralize education so that parents and localities have the kind of control they used to have before the federal government took over.
Do proponents of charter schools and vouchers have anything to worry about?
Common Core has the potential to obliterate any benefits of school choice. If Common Core is imposed on all public schools, whether traditional or charter, and maybe on private schools in states with voucher programs, there will be no point in having a choice. As Dr. Jay Green, a prominent local control advocate, puts it, what good is it to have 100 restaurants to choose from if they all have to be Italian?
Well, surely homeschoolers and private schools do not have anything to worry about, right?
Proponents of Common Core want all education ultimately to be under Common Core. Their plans are truly sweeping. They want to control the entire education system, kindergarten through college, using Common Core. Common Core plays a key role towards standardizing a type of education that is specifically geared to developing human capital for the global labor market. In fact, Common Core proponents market this educational shift by claiming it will help our nation compete in the global economy. It's a progressive school-to-work dream to think that government finally will have all the tools in place to plan for future labor markets. Progressives, or socialists as they have been historically known, have long sought to create a managed economy. The free enterprise system with all the individual decisions of a free people is just too messy for them. They like the idea of government directing the economy and controlling the educational opportunities and job opportunities of the nation. Some states are quickly moving to embrace the career cluster portion of the overall plan with the false hope that government can adequately plan and predict future economic trends, as well as analyze student data to ensure that graduates can be better plugged into the managed economic machine. But what really needs to be made clear in all of this, since it is very easy to get lost in the details, is what happens to the nation with this philosophical shift in education. Unfortunately, most people don't see the big picture. Yet, all the pieces of the puzzle fit neatly together to create a new vision for the nation. This new vision has nothing to do with the vision the Founding Fathers gave us. They gave us a vision and a constitutional framework promoting individual freedom, personal responsibility, limited government, free enterprise, and local control. This new vision, on the other hand, advances the model of a command economy and unlimited government. Through our schools, the next generation will be conditioned to accept that government has the right to direct them to serve the economic priorities of the nation, or any other priorities the government deems best. In other words, government will no longer be their servant, but will become their master.
What can regular citizens do?
There is still time to stop Common Core. Some states never accepted the standards in the first place, states such as Texas and Alaska, and others have withdrawn, such as Virginia, or are seriously considering withdrawing. Activists in many states are learning about the threat of Common Core and are lobbying their representatives to pass legislation reversing the stealth commitment to Common Core. Here's what to do. Start by educating yourself on the Common Core. Next, educate others. Parents, educate fellow parents. Educate your fellow citizens. Educate your school board members. Share the websites with them. Contact your state legislators and urge them to support legislation to withdraw from the Common Core and the intrusive data tracking system. Contact the governor, the state school superintendent, and the State Board of Education and urge them to support legislation to withdraw from Common Core. Finally, visit the Citizens Take Action page at stopcommoncore.com for additional ways to get involved in stopping Common Core. Chief Justice John Roberts recently warned the states against accepting federal mandates that they don't want in order to get federal money. He said, "The states are separate and independent sovereigns. Sometimes they have to act like it." This ought to serve as fair warning to all those states that have jumped at the chance to get Race to the Top grant funds or to obtain a No Child Left Behind waiver from the federal government. It is the people of the states who pay for public education, and these are our children in public schools. The elected officials of our states have no right to hand over the governance of our educational system to either the federal government or to unaccountable boards of nonprofit organizations. It's time to tell all these people to stop experimenting on our children and stop robbing us of our constitutional rights to control education in our states. Together, we can reclaim local control of education. Let's revive that great rallying cry of the civil rights movement. If not us, who? If not now, when? Let's pass liberty on to the next generation.